In today's video, I'll be doing a comparison between two gaming graphics cards, the AMD Radeon RX 6600 XT and the RX 6700 XT. If you watched my last video, you'll know that I built myself a budget PC, an Intel i5-10400F paired with an RX 6600 XT. In that video, I cover part selection, a time-lapse build, and some testing on PC racing games, and I hope you check it out because it is a fun PC build video and it'll give you an idea of the PC I'm using. Just quickly before we begin, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button if you're not already, and that way you'll get more of my videos in your YouTube recommendations. Okay, I'll go over the specs really quickly and then get straight into the results, and then I'll have some closing comments. According to Techpowerup, the RX 6700 XT is about 17% faster at 1080p than the RX 6600 XT. On paper, the RX 6700 XT actually has 20% more shading units than the 6600 XT, 2560 cores versus 2048 cores. The RX 6700 XT is faster at higher resolutions though. At 1440p it's 25% faster, and at 4K it's 38% faster. That's because the 6600 XT has a memory bandwidth of 256 GB per second versus the 384 GB per second in the 6700 XT. There's also 8 GB of GDDR6 RAM in the 6600 XT and 12 GB of GDDR6 in the 6700 XT. There's a $100 price difference in the MSRPs. Because I've built a budget PC with an Intel i5-10400F, 16 GB of DDR4 2400 RAM, 500 GB SSD, and paired it with a 1080p 75Hz monitor, my intention really was to use this at 1080p resolution. The RX 6600 XT could definitely play many games at 1440p and at 60 FPS, but what I want to find out today is whether it's worth the extra $100 to jump up to the 6700 XT. I think this is a question a lot of people might have when considering buying a PC, and while the percentage differences in reviews give a good guide, sometimes the gains aren't as good on the final build of a PC. If you're using budget parts like myself, you might be limited by slower RAM or a slower CPU, and that can drop the performance. For testing, I'm going with the same 8 racing games again. It's also interesting going back to some of these older racing titles. A lot of these have aged really well. Games like Dirt Rally still look really good and still perform really well. There haven't been many new racing game releases, so Forza Horizon 5 is the newest title here, but really I'm just selecting the racing games I've had in my library. Finally, for the two graphics cards, I'm using an XFX Quickster Radeon RX 6600 XT and a Gigabyte RX 6700 XT Eagle. Let's start with Assetto Corsa. This is a game that is able to reach some incredibly high frame rates, over 400 FPS at times on both cards. You could probably limit the frame rate like say at 200 FPS and not really notice any difference, and possibly save on some power usage as well. This would be useful on PC handhelds like a Steam Deck where you could get more battery life. The 6700 XT actually scales well, getting 9% faster frame rates than the 6600 XT. While this is well down on the 17% performance difference Techpowerup suggested, compared to the other games I tested in this video, 9% is a pretty good result. Dirt Rally is next, and the 6700 XT is a bit disappointing here. The difference is just 5%, and I'm not particularly sure why, but there seems to be a bottleneck somewhere, and the 6700 XT just isn't that much faster at 1080p. While this isn't a racing game, I will definitely be playing Euro Truck Simulator 2 on my racing rig, so this had to be included in my testing. This was another surprising result, with just 3% difference between the two graphics cards. This is definitely not worth paying the extra $100 for. Could it be some of these older titles just are maxed out on these newer cards? For Formula 1 2018, the difference is 5%. The RX 6600 XT had average frame rates of 156.12 FPS, and the RX 6700 XT had 164.1 FPS. It is rather surprising testing these games out. On paper, you would think that 17% difference was worth paying a bit extra for, but in the real world, when the 6600 XT already performs well over 140 FPS, an extra 10% or even 20% isn't that noticeable to the naked eye. Forza Horizon 5 is the newest title on this list. It's also the most demanding title, where the RX 6600 XT had an average frame rate of 105.85 FPS, and the RX 6700 XT had 122.62 FPS. This is a percentage difference of 15%. It's interesting that newer, possibly more demanding titles favor the 6700 XT, so this is something to keep in mind whether you're interested to continue playing mostly old favorites or prefer to play new titles, or a bit of both. Next up, this is Grid Autosport, another personal favorite racing game. If you haven't played this, there's a few grid racing games out there, but I highly recommend Grid Autosport if you're after a fun, half arcadey, half simulator type experience. The 6700 XT did post higher frame rates, but not by a lot, 147.96 to 141.95. It doesn't seem like this would be worth getting a 6700 XT for. This next title had the most interesting result of the lot. In Project Cars, the 6600 XT was just a bit faster than the RX 6700 XT, which is kinda incredible and almost impossible that it happened. Let me try to explain. Firstly, in every game, I ran one race and logged the data, which is usually around 5 minutes long, but can be as long as 10 minutes. For more accurate results, it would be ideal to do more runs, but I didn't have the time to do this. Secondly, it's possible there's a bottleneck somewhere. The data log showed no more than 75% CPU usage on any of the threads, but it's possible the game itself doesn't run any faster. The end result was that the 6600 XT was 1.6 FPS faster, and just 1% faster, so this is definitely within the margin of error, and doing a repeat run might end up with a result where the 6700 XT is faster. That said, it's unlikely that the 6700 XT will show a big lead, and this is another game that shows that if you're interested in older titles, the 6600 XT will be just fine. Finally, we have WRC7. There's actually a 200 FPS cap on this game, so as I was playing, I was noticing that the frame rate wouldn't go any higher, even though in the settings it's actually set to unlocked frame rate. Both graphics cards are capable of hitting 200 FPS, however the 6700 XT is 4% faster, but at these speeds the 6600 XT performs just fine. Overall, although just 8 games were tested, the results have given me some interesting food for thought, and I hope they also helped you out as well. The end average result over the 8 games was just 5% difference in favor of the RX 6700 XT. Sometimes it might be the easy thing to do and just look at the percentage difference in the review between two cards, but it doesn't necessarily translate into the actual performance that you'll get when you finally build your PC. If you're building a PC and you're playing older PC titles or racing titles like I'm doing, and if you're doing it with budget parts, you may not get the performance, and it could be any number of issues, whether it's the CPU or RAM or even the games themselves. My advice is always to just buy what you need rather than spending extra to jump up to get a better part. While in some cases it can future-proof you, in this case with these racing games there's almost little to no benefit. The best thing is to find some benchmark videos of a PC with very similar specs to the one you're building and see if you're happy with the performance for the games you want to be playing. That's going to be it for this one. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and I'll see you in the next one.